Paige Canfield-Grunigal here with Kevin Canfield, author of View from the Middle, who is also coincidentally my father.
And proud to be.
So lots of good political conversations in our family. Dad, I was thinking about a conversation we had recently, and a song by John Mayer came to mind. It's called Waiting on the World to Change. And I think a lot of times that's where I find myself when I come to politics, is that I'm just waiting for things to change because they're so bad. And that doesn't seem to be working because nothing's changing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of wondering your insight on how did we get to a place that feels this bad, and what can we do to change it?
And I think there's two great questions. And I think let's handle the first one first. Is how did we get to where? Number one, where are we, and how did we get there?
Okay.
So probably the best way to look at that is to look at the kind of the history of our spending. And again, most economists would say the best way to look at that is percentage of GDP. Because the country's changed, population, inflation, etc. Percentage of GDP is probably the best way to look at that.
Okay.
It gives you a real idea of the government's involvement in our life. So if you take a look at this graph here, I've taken a look at from 1950, just right after World War II, through to today.
Okay. And the red, what's the red line?
The red line is the government spend, the federal government spending, and the blue line is the revenue that is taken in through taxes. So if you take a look at those first, the years from about 1950 to 1975, Eisenhower through Nixon, roughly balanced budget, and good economy too, so it proves that we can do it. Moving on to the next segment there, from Ford to Bush, you can see that gap begins to widen there, and we're spending more than we're taking in. And one of my favorite presidents is in there too. So, but they were good times under Reagan. And in there, that period, the revenues are pretty steady. So it's really the spending increase that caused the gap.
So not perfect, but still good revenue.
Yeah. And then we go to Clinton, and during Clinton's years, we actually balanced the budget and had a surplus. And a pretty good economy too. So again, goes back to say we can have a balanced budget and a good economy at the same time. But recently, under President Obama, we've had an explosion of spending, and the revenue has declined at the same time. So if you look at that difference between the red line and the blue line, that is really what we all need to be concerned about. Whenever that happens, we are creating deficits.
So what is our current deficit under Obama's administration?
The last year, the one-year deficit was $1.5 trillion. Now the total government spending was almost $4 trillion, but we spent $1.5 trillion more than we brought in.
Okay, but that's not even the total amount of the debt that we will be inheriting.
Right.
What is the total debt?
Yeah, the accumulation of all of those deficits leaves us today with a debt of $16.5 trillion today, heading towards 20 in the future.
Okay, so none of that sounds really good. And even though...
I hate to laugh about that. No.
And you and I talk a lot about you can complain and point out things that are wrong, and if you look for the worst in people, surely you're going to find it. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about what can we actually do? What can politicians do to make this better?
Absolutely. And there's a couple, we need to look at things on both sides of the ledger. So how do we increase revenues? Because I think we actually have to do that. And how do we reduce spending?
Okay.
So number one, the first thing that we can do in terms of actually both of those is to employ more people. Our unemployment has been, under President Obama from anywhere from 8 to 10%. Typically it's more like 5 to 6%. So if we can employ more people, it has a double benefit. The one benefit is that we have to pay welfare to fewer of those people, so it reduces the government spending. But it also puts more taxpayers into the system, so our revenues will go up. So that's a really good thing to do. So if we want to employ more people, we need to have a partnership with business.
And you mean not government jobs, you're talking about private sector jobs.
Very good, absolutely, because a government job actually is a net negative to this situation.
Okay, all right, what else?
The second thing we can do in terms of revenues is to reform taxes. GE made $10 billion last year and paid zero in taxes. We need to eliminate those kind of deductions and increase our revenues as a result. The other thing is I'm in favor of everyone having skin in the game, which means probably a small federal income tax or federal sales tax. 1 or 2% can bring in anywhere from $50 to $100 billion, and the impact on the average person in the United States is maybe $150. So everyone has skin in the game, and it small impact on the individual. So I think that's a good idea.
All right. What else?
Well, and let's go to the other side of the ledger, which is reducing spending. We talked about employing more people. That's a great idea.
Okay.
But also we need to eliminate waste in the system and programs that don't work. My favorite here is target is the Department of Education. It costs us almost $80 billion, and it would be great if it was working, but while it's been here, our SAT scores have gone down, so let's get rid of it. And then finally, Medicare, Social Security, they're just reaching demographic impossibilities in terms of sustaining those programs. When Social Security started, for example, there were 16 people contributing for every person that was drawing benefits. Today, that number is like 3 to 1. In 15 years, it will be 2 to 1. That just doesn't work.
Right, mathematically.
Correct.
That's not going to work. So, okay, all great things. I'm sure people who are watching this and nodding their heads, agreeing with you. Again, to me, it comes back to this place of waiting. I feel like I'm caught in the middle between elections. I've missed one election. I'm waiting for another one. Is there anything I can do in between that's actually going to drive change?
Yeah. Well, you did hit one major point, is that elections is the time to make big changes. So I encourage everybody, and especially in your generation, to understand the issues and vote for sure. In between, you need to communicate with Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And so as my part of this, what I'm going to do is on my blog site, I'm going to create a letter that talks about this issue that you can, if you want, copy and send to your representative in Washington.
Okay, that sounds like a good deal.